What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. The Adcast, we're here with you. As always, big thanks for tuning in to this episode of the podcast, where we're going to talk some Badgers. Badger hoops jumping up to number 6 in the latest AP polls. RJ Cardinal is going to be joining us to talk about that. Also hockey, Badger hockey. We are going to continue our consulting series with the Packers. We're going to take a look at the safety group coming up here as well. But we lead off this episode of the podcast with a couple more names being added to the defensive coordinator search for the Packers. And they're two coaches at the time of this recording, two coaches from this Baltimore Ravens staff. Denard Wilson, who I mentioned as, you know, in a podcast from a few days ago, last week, in a previous podcast, when I put 6 names out there. Denard Wilson, who coaches the defensive backs for the Baltimore Ravens. According to Ian Rappaport from the NFL Network, the Packers have requested permission to interview him. And as I was just getting ready to record this podcast, Tom Pelissero also putting out there on the X/Twitter that the Packers requested to interview Ravens inside linebackers coach Zach Orr for defensive coordinator. Tom went on to say that Orr is a former linebacker who is projected as a defensive coordinator very soon. He has been a close lieutenant to Mike Macdonald in Baltimore, which would be interesting if Mike Macdonald gets one of these head coaching jobs with Seattle or Washington. Could Orr take over as defensive coordinator there or follow Mike to be a defensive coordinator elsewhere? No big surprise, I think, you know, Green Bay looking at some guys from the defensive staff in Baltimore. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, I like the idea of Denard Wilson. You know, he spent some time in Philly as defensive backs coach. After that, after he had, you know, was bypassed for the defensive coordinator job this past season for Philly, went to Baltimore, and there were some people in Philly kind of wondering, did Philly make the right call? Did they, you know, overlook Denard Wilson? Should they have hired him as defensive coordinator for this previous season? You look at the guys that he has helped develop in that backfield. You know, Kyle Hamilton this year, safety for Baltimore. You look at the job he's done with like Darius Slay with Philly. Seems like the stops he has gone through, he has instantly improved that passing defense, those secondary players, those defensive backs and safeties. He has learned under Greg Williams. He has learned under Todd Bowles. He has learned under Gannon with Philly, and then this past year with Mike Macdonald with the Ravens. He's worked in 3-4, 4-3 systems. I like that versatility, and that to me just speaks so much that looking at the resume and looking at who he has worked under, those defensive coordinators, I like that. Like the names that have been reported to either being interviewed or have interviewed for the Packers defensive coordinator position, Denard Wilson's probably my number 1 guy. He's probably my number 1 if I had to rank him on there. I would be happy if it was Denard Wilson. I know he doesn't have any play calling experience, but for me, I think that would be a home run hire. It's all based off projection. We won't know how it will work out if he does get the job and how the defense plays. But I think when you look at the secondary group, especially the safeties, that's an area that has to get better. The communication has to get better back there. I think Denard Wilson, with his experience in playing in aggressive style defenses, I would love to bring that over to Green Bay. I would love that. The Zach Orr one is interesting. Now, if that name sounds familiar to Wisconsin football fans, his brother Chris Orr played linebacker for the Badgers. So a little bit of connection there. But Zach Orr's career, his pro career, ended because he had a herniated disc. So he moved into coaching here. And you look at it, he spent a year with Jacksonville as the outside linebackers coach back in 2021. He's been with the Ravens since 2022. Not a ton of coaching experience, right? Not a ton of coaching experience. He began as a defensive analyst with Baltimore from 2017 to 2020. But an intriguing name, and it was honestly a name that I was kind of looking at when you start to look at different teams and potential targets for defensive coordinator positions over there. So you look at the job that he's been working with the inside linebackers with Baltimore, Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith over there, two really active and talented, athletic inside linebackers. right, over there in Baltimore, or has worked with that. You look at Green Bay, Quay Walker. Do they want to bring in a guy that's got experience working with inside linebackers and really maybe trying to utilize Quay Walker as a focal part of this defense? Okay, he's got some time playing or coaching outside linebackers. Rashawn Gary. I firmly believe this is a defense that you've got to kind of like highlight Rashawn Gary and Quay Walker and maximize those two talents. You'd be bringing in a guy that works with linebackers and has worked with some good ones. Do you try to utilize that? The one thing that does make me a little bit nervous is the experience. Okay, he'll be 32 this year, but you look at the coaching experience, you just kind of wonder, is there enough there? Is there enough? So, intriguing one. I thought about him looking at this. I just didn't know if the experience was quite there. Denard Wilson, I'm all about right now. I'm all about. And he's been interviewing for other defensive coordinator positions. We'll see if Green Bay is able to if Green Bay is able to get that one done or not. We'll see. I still think we're going to know by the end of this week or this weekend who the Packers defensive coordinator is going to be. Hey, speaking of defensive backs, safeties, right? That's next up on our consulting series here. I want to take a look at the Packers safeties now. And this is a group that I think is going to be really interesting to follow and to watch for the Pack is going to be the safety group. Now, the safety position was a position that you could kind of maybe say was overlooked in the offseason or not addressed enough when we headed into preseason games and training camp. It was a position group that a starting job was up for grabs. Darnell Savage was one of them, and then you had Rudy Ford and Jonathan Owens kind of battling it out. Anthony Johnson Jr. getting some reps, the safety, 7th-round pick. Rookie safety, 7th-round pick. And now this year you've got Darnell Savage, who's a free agent. You've got Rudy Ford, who's a free agent, and Jonathan Owens, who's a free agent. Jonathan Owens, I would say, got better as the season progressed. Kind of, I think, really turned a page, maybe that Thanksgiving Day game against Detroit. Darnell missed some time, injury and such. But when he's on, Darnell is such an interesting player because when he's on and he's playing really well, he's good. He's a really solid player. It's just the consistency surrounding Darnell Savage that is just like, do this every single time. Rudy Ford was banged up this year. A lot of thought that he would be the starter heading into it and kind of got that role right away. But mostly when he was first brought in last year, it was for special teams when the Jaguars released him and got an opportunity to play defense, had that Dallas game where he had a couple picks against Dak. But I think for sure this is a position group that Brian Gutekunst really has to look at hard. Be like, okay, we got to get better here. And if one of our major issues on defense last year was a lack of communication or poor communication, you've got to get better in the back end. In today's NFL, in today's game, you've got to have some good safety play. It can't be consistent. That's your last line of defense in a lot of cases here. Now, to me, I would love a Kyle Hamilton type of player, Raven safety, physical, could play up in the box, line of scrimmage, back end, covers your tight ends. I would love that style of safety. There's just right now there really isn't that dude out there. Perhaps the best safety available in the draft, if we're kind of taking a look at an early draft board, and really when you kind of look at the depth at safety, you're talking back end first round, mostly day 2 type of players. But the top 2 that you've maybe seen in mock drafts go in the back end or early in the second round, Kinchins from Miami, Tyler Nubin from Minnesota. Those are your probably 2. Then you got Kalen Bullock from USC. That's mixed in there too. So those are probably your top 3 safeties because I think for me, safety is a big need in this draft for Green Bay. Now, if you're looking at free agents to kind of come in, maybe spend a little bit to bring them in there, Antoine Winfield Jr., he's going to be up there, but I'd be shocked if Tampa Bay lets him go. Got Kyle Duggar from New England. kind of a hybrid safety linebacker over there. So maybe they look at somebody out there too, but I feel like Green Bay is going to address it early in the draft and bring back one of their guys, at least one of their guys. Now the question is, which one? Because if you bring back Savage, you kind of got a little bit more coverage with him, kind of that center field type of safety. Now, again, there's a lot of talk. Is he better suited as a nickel corner? Is he better suited in a coverage role like that? Maybe with a new defensive coordinator coming in, they'd be like, hey, I want Savage because I can play him at that nickel slot, but also do some different things here. The type of safety that I think that maybe they address in the draft will maybe kind of depend on which safety they decide to keep. I think Savage is probably going to cost a little bit more. But if it were me, and I was doing a little consulting work here, if it were me, I'd have no problem bringing back Darnell on a 1 year. If he takes a 1 year, maybe, that's the one thing. You can't just say, hey, take the 1 year and take it. If he would be willing to take a 1 year, kind of, 1 year, prove it, has a chance to make more money. Again, it's going to depend on his market. Just takes one team to go out there and blow it out of the water with an offer. But I wouldn't mind Jonathan Owens back either. Now, I don't think Jonathan Owens is a difference maker at the safety position. I think he's a good depth piece. I think he gives you solid depth at that position. But I want a playmaker, a difference maker at that safety spot. They got to figure out who that is. That to me is if they find that, and you look at the rest of the roster on the defensive side, you got your defensive line that they've invested in a lot. Devontae Wyatt's up there. Kenny Clark. They used a couple picks last year with Carl Brooks, Colby Wooden, who showed some promise this year. They've invested in their edge rushers, Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Lucas Van Ness. They've invested in inside linebackers with Quay Walker. We'll see about Devondre Campbell. Corner, Jair. First-round pick, Eric Stokes. This year, they have to invest in the safety. They've got to figure out that position. It got I don't think it purposely got overlooked last year, but it kind of was like, okay, that's the one we're probably going to take a hit on. They've got to get that true number one safety. Like when you look at it, it's like, okay, that's a dude. And a versatile safety. I want a versatile safety. I want a safety that you're not just pigeonholing into a role. Ideally, I would love a safety that, hey, you know what? He can come on a blitz. Hey, you know what? He can help stop the run. But at the same time, he's going to be able to cover some tight ends. Maybe even help you in the back end over the top on a double coverage. I want that versatile Swiss Army type of safety back there. Not just a dude who is going to, he's a really good run stopper, but really stinks in coverage. I want that versatile. So if it were up to me, and I would hand in a report to Goody, I'd say I don't mind bringing back Darnell. I wouldn't invest long-term in him. If he'd be willing to do a 1 year, maybe even a 2 year, who knows? Because really the depth there is so up in the air with this group. If you want to do a 2 year deal, okay. I got no problem bringing back Jonathan Owens. Again, I think he's a very good depth piece, but he's not a difference-making safety over there. You've got to find that guy in the draft or free agency, wherever it's coming. That you've got to get better at. Get better at safety. You're going to get better at communication. And I think that's going to be a big improvement to your defensive unit overall, too. And a lot of that's going to depend on the coordinator that they do hire. The background they come in, the style, the scheme that they're going to bring over to Green Bay, too. Safety, that safety group's going to be an interesting follow this offseason for sure, considering their approach, what it was like last year and in preseason and training camp. How it played out this year with a bunch of different bodies. I mean, we could probably all think of some games like, oh, okay, so now this formation is going to be Savage and Owens, and then the next one was like Rudy Ford and Anthony Johnson Jr., going back there. It was quite the rotation back there. They were just trying to find something that was working. And Matt LaFleur, at the end of the season, talked about how, communication's so much better when Darnell Savage is back there, talking about that's one of his main keys, one of the big things that he brings to that group. Let's take a quick break and switch gears and talk some Badgers with Mr. RJ Cardinal coming up after this quick break. Winter is here in the Chippewa Valley, which means it's even more important to make sure you have a good vehicle to hit the winter roads of Wisconsin. Need that vehicle for this winter season? Look no further than Toyson Ford in Chippewa Falls. Whether it's a car, truck, or SUV from their new or used inventory, Toyson Ford has the vehicle you're looking for. Making sure you have a good, proper working vehicle is incredibly important this winter season, and Toyson Ford knows that. Just give them a visit today at 1000 Chippewa Crossing Boulevard and visit ToysonFord.com. It's that time of year where we may be stuck indoors for a bit, so you need to make sure your pantries, fridge, and freezers are fully stocked. How do you do that while also saving some money? Easy. Just shop at Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Whether it's stocking the pantry with soups or dried goods, or loading up the deep freezer with pizzas and frozen foods, Hy-Vee has the best selection to help keep you stocked during the winter months. And with their Hy-Vee perks, you'll save money at the register and the gas pump. Stock up on your favorite grocery items and save money with Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Let's chat some Wisconsin Badger hoops, Badger hockey, and a little football here with Mr. RJ Cardinal. Even with their 6th ranking now in the AP polls, RJ, tell me if I'm wrong on this. I still feel like, are they a little bit overlooked from the national sense right now?
Maybe a little bit, but you start having some people who say this is a team that has Final Four potential all of a sudden. So, you had some under the radar things going there for a while, but I think after you're started beating teams and like your only real flop of a loss so far this year is to Penn State, because Providence was doing well up until their top player went down with an ACL injury, or one of their top players, so they've kind of hit a slide here. But at the time, I don't think you could call that one a bad loss, because, we could see it as that when we lost to them, but after our game, where they went on a bit of a run, that was okay. But yeah, so really, your only real bad loss right now is to Penn State, and you're moving through and continuing to win. You've only lost one conference game on the road. So, you got a tough battle coming here Thursday? Yeah, Thursday, at Nebraska. So it's one of those, hopefully the team itself can keep playing that kind of underdog role, but when you got a number like that next to your name, does get a little harder mentally for you to keep that up. But little under the radar, but I think people are starting to pick up on Wisconsin, except for some AP writers who are still putting them out of the top 10 at least after what they've done so far this season. Whatever they think of the Big Ten, or I guess, is their reasoning. But there is somebody who's had them, beat writer for UConn, had them at 18th. But that could be one to try to elevate the Big East. He still had Marquette at number 9. So, it is what it is. We've talked about AP writers in other sports before, where, sorry, it's your job to watch more than just the beat you cover. And it shows that you still think Wisconsin's Wisconsin, and apparently don't think well enough of the Big Ten to rank them.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. So one of those players, he had a magnificent game the other day against Michigan State, and it's a guy that we have been talking about a lot this season, but just looking at his last 5 games, he's been in double-digit scoring every single one of them. I'm talking A.J. Storr here, 28 points against Michigan State, 15 against the Gophers, 15 against Indiana, 23 against Penn State in that loss, 14 against Northwestern. He's not going to win Player of the Year or anything like that, but is this a guy who's also making a name for himself, do you think, across the nation for his play this year?
Yeah, it's one of those people, they weren't surprised he picked Wisconsin. It was closer to home. They felt he was more of an athlete than Wisconsin had on their roster, and I think we're seeing that now. I have seen one sports writer tweeting out, people thought it was a bad, Wisconsin fans thought it was a bad fit. I don't ever remember anybody saying it was a bad fit. They were just surprised he picked Wisconsin for what we saw on tape. And that's not calling it a bad fit. That was like, hey, we got an athlete. And you and I even talked about it when we were talking about him committing and saying, this is the kind of thing that can make the swing offense go. And we saw it in 2015, where if you have athletes playing in this system, it can be up and down, a high point per possession kind of offense, and we're seeing that this year. Scoring's up for Wisconsin as of a few previous seasons. Their defense is still doing well. It's on this run, even in the losses. For the most part, they're scoring over 70 points. I think there's only one game in here that in the past few, you beat Minnesota 61-59. Other than that, you have been scoring upwards of 70 points a game. So, on this little streak of one loss and however many wins it is now, to one loss in the last X amount of games. I'm kind of spitballing here because I don't remember the exact, but it is impressive what this team's doing offensively. And we've talked about how maybe having AJ Storr is a guy who can open things up for other people, but then when those people start playing, they realize they can't focus on just AJ Storr, and it allows him to go back to being the guy. I guess we can start calling him the guy.
Yeah, the guy. Yeah,
I know earlier in the season we were talking about, maybe not all the time he's going to be that guy, but we'll call him the guy. And then, like we have been kind of trotting around the past couple of weeks, Klesmit has been seeming to be the number 2 guy, but I think that number 2 is still a rotating kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at AJ Storr's numbers. He has scored in double-digit figures all but 2 games, and those 2 games were back in November, and one of them was Virginia. Outside of November, he's scored in double figures every single game for the Badgers this year. Unreal.
He's better than we thought he was going to be in this system, and he can make jump shots. We've seen him, hold onto a rim and grab a ball, which is not legal, but hey, it looks really cool. We saw him do breakaway dunks. We've seen, he's just the kind of guy who can change the perception of a program, and hopefully that's happening here. And I honestly would like to see him stay. I don't think he's having a great enough year to hopefully think he's going to be leaving for the NBA.
Right.
But he seems to be a guy who's on a trajectory to go to the NBA. So hopefully we get him for at least another year, and he can be the straw that stirs the drink for at least one more season after this.
Another player that I think is kind of having I'll say interesting season is Stephen Kroll, and I know he's averaging just under 12 points per game, but he's 7.5 rebounds per game. His scoring might be a little up and down. I know he went through that stretch in end of December, early January, where he was putting up double-figure scoring, but his rebounds have kind of been consistent over there. But is this the version of Stephen Kroll that I guess maybe we were kind of hoping to see for the last couple of years, in your opinion, RJ?
He does seem to be a little more of a presence around the rim. In years past, we've talked about missing bunny shots, not really being a presence on the defensive end of the glass. So I don't think we're there yet, because I'd still like to see the kind of guy with the progression we saw like in years past, like Jared Bergeron, Frank Kaminsky, Hap, around the rim, be like that guy who can take over a game down low. And I'm not sure we have that still. But he is getting to the point where we're watching him and seeing a progression. It's just not that kind of junior, senior, big man progression that we've seen in years past. So I'd like to see a little more out of him, but there's still the time periods here where he does seem to revert into, I'm going to try a little sky hook, bang it off the back of the rim, and it's going to go out instead of in. So we're seeing improvement. I'd like to see more.
We got that Nebraska game coming up, and then obviously the big one against Purdue on Sunday. I know the Badgers defeated Nebraska earlier this season. Nebraska 15-6 overall. Any concern about a letdown game ahead of a big game like Purdue coming up here at the Kohl Center?
Absolutely. I hate to say that, but Nebraska's home splits are heads above their road splits. Their shooting percentage is much better at home. Like every statistic is like you're looking at their splits and you're like, how does this team play so bad on the road? Mm-hmm. They beat Purdue at home. They've won some big games at home. I think their only loss at home this year is to Creighton, I think I was reading. So they defend that court pretty well. And the Badgers have never had an easy time playing at their new arena. And I'm not sure they've even ever played at the old arena. I don't remember. I remember when the new arena opened, no, they probably have, because that opened after 2010 when they joined the conference. So, it's just been hard going for the Badgers in Nebraska. So, I hope there's not a letdown, but it's definitely one I can see a tough game happening, and hopefully it's not give them a 10-point lead like we did. Absolutely, you could see a game that is a hard fought, knock 'em out kind of style. I'd like to say this team isn't going to be overlooking anybody to move on to Purdue before it's time to. But Nebraska, a much better team at home.
Do you, not to overlook Nebraska now, but since this is the only time we'll talk to you before the game, how does Wisconsin, in your opinion, match up against a team like Purdue?
Just like years past, I'm not sure we have the big men to really irritate Zach Edey and take him out of the game. Other positions, I think defensively we can match up well, but it's that, can you stop Zach Edey and the guys inside? In the past, it's been a team effort. It's going to have to be a team effort again. But it's really, that's the point where I think Purdue could be able to take over the game. Zach Edey, being what he is, he's big enough even at, he's got the weight for the height, whereas some of our guys, like Crowell and Nolan Winter, right now are just not big enough to match up well with him. I think that's where the main matchup problem is, and it's one of those, though, that can lose you a game if you can't get Edey into foul trouble and your bigs start getting into foul trouble while guarding him. So we'll see if there's some good home calls coming up there, but it's going to be a tough game come Sunday as well.
Yeah. RJ Cardinal joining us here. Switching gears here just a little bit to hockey now. Now men's splitting the weekend series, although that last game was pretty exciting OT thriller over Michigan there, losing the first one 1-5, then getting that 6-5 victory in OT. And now, RJ, it doesn't get any easier because you're back at home, but you're welcoming the Gophers to town this weekend.
Yeah, and I mean, overall, it's one of the biggest weekends probably in Kohl Center area history, because I'll include the LeBron Arena in there.
Mm-hmm.
Friday, Saturday, you got number 4, number 9 teams in the nation going at it in men's hockey. Women's hockey, Saturday, Sunday, you got the number 4 and number 16 team in the country going at it with the women's hockey team in St. Cloud State. And then, Sunday, you have 2 top 10 programs in Purdue and Wisconsin going at it in men's basketball. But, number 9, Minnesota comes into town. It's swept them earlier in the year, and this is really one you kind of need to take it to them again, and hopefully get the kind of performance that you did earlier in the year when Minnesota was ranked number 1, and you beat them 5-2 and 3-2, I think, if I remember correctly. But they're coming on. They're coming to you as a team that's won like 5 or 6 out of their last 8. Nope, that doesn't sound right. Wow, they have 1 loss in there for like the last 8 games, I think. So they're coming on a little bit of a hot streak, and they coming off of a split, I believe, with Michigan State. So that's where their 1 loss is, and that's a team that Wisconsin's trying to chase down. So they're coming into town with a bit of confidence, and I mean, we were talking about last week going into the Michigan game that this team needed to be able to skate with Michigan, and Friday night they did not, but skate and score with Michigan, and Saturday they turned it around, kept up the scoring with them, and dug out that overtime victory with a 6-5 win, and got the extra point on the weekend. So this is as big of a series as they're going to have. I think I saw Friday night's a whiteout, and they're opening the third deck. I mean, it's another one where, I mean, it's awesome that they're opening the third deck, but I can remember when the third deck was always open, and it wasn't an issue of filling the Kohl Center for hockey games, even when you knew it was an outmatched kind of game, and they were expected to just be a blowout sweep with somebody coming into town. So it's good to see interest getting back into the hockey team, but when you go from you're outside of 1 NCAA appearance in the last few years to moving ahead of the 13 wins you had last year, and you're the first team in college hockey to have 20 wins on the year. So that's always awesome to see, and it's good to see people being back into hockey, and this is goes back to the old WCHA rivalries, and it's just one of those, like, fill the barn and get people back into hockey, and it's a team that at least people know. Mm-hmm. So even if they're casual hockey fans, they'll come in and root for the Badgers.
Final question for you, because I got to throw a football one in here every time you're on. Kind of a two-parter. One, you got the Senior Bowl coming up this week. Is that something you kind of watch personally? And then Tanner Bortolini's over there. How big of a performance do you think he has to have at the Senior Bowl for his draft stock? Or do you think he's going to, just because the type of player he is and the program he comes from, that he's going to be maybe an early pick in the upcoming draft this spring?
I really just watch it for Wisconsin. So, when they post clips and stuff like that, I'll watch those. Don't really care about other people, but, I mean, it's trying to see how Badgers are doing. I don't think Bortolini will be going as a center. I guess it depends on what kind of system he goes into. If he goes into a system that's under center, I think he'll be okay there, but definitely think he'll be more of a guard at the NFL level, and has proven he can play guard at a D1 level here. I think he'll be fine at guard if in the NFL, but it'll be one of those to be able to possibly be better than a 5th to 7th or undrafted free agent, he'll have to put a pretty darn good week together for the NFL scouts to think better of him and be in light of more of those Badger offensive linemen that people have quote unquote reached for, and yet those players are still doing pretty darn well in the NFL, even though they were a reach apparently. So I think for him, yeah, definitely has to have a great week of practice to have anybody think that he's going to be above a fifth-round pick to kind of improve his draft stock.
I don't know if you've been kind of looking at some of the stuff for like not maybe mock drafts, but like kind of rankings. And last week I saw CBS Sports had, for running backs, they listed Braylon Allen as the number one running back in the draft, and that's the only place I've seen him where he's ranked number one. You've got, it's kind of all over the place here, but I'm really fascinated to see where Braylon Allen kind of falls in this draft, or where the mocks have him as we get a little bit closer there.
Yeah, I mean, he's still got the quote-unquote issues that Wisconsin running backs have had in the past. He's even got he's sat out a bit and with injury. He had a heavy workload. He's not necessarily the best pass catcher out of the backfield, but we have seen him do it. So he's got the stereotypical issues that a Wisconsin running back does. So I'm not sure I see him as the number one back, but like you said, only CBS Sports had him listed there. Definitely see him as a back that'll be probably drafted third or fourth round. But then again, that seems to be more so where running backs who aren't considered elite are getting drafted anyway. I mean, you don't see too many running backs getting that second huge contract anymore. So, I mean, it's not like teams want to pay them upfront before they even start playing as a first or second round draft pick, unless they know this is going to be this person's going to be an integral part of our offense moving forward. So, maybe a late second, third, fourth round pick for Braylon Allen, and that's just going off of how people perceive his scenario of injury. Not injury prone, but he's got a history of injuries. And most of it's like probably leg health, so that doesn't help either. As well as overusage in the offensive system he was under. And in this day and age, you got to be able to catch out of the backfield, and I still think there's the perception that Wisconsin running backs can't catch out of the backfield unless their name's Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah. RJ, dude, appreciate it as always, man. Enjoy the rest of the week. Hopefully, when we catch up with you next Tuesday, we're talking about a win against Purdue. And maybe even, I got to imagine you take care of business against Nebraska and Purdue, you're probably a top 5 team in the latest polls then.
Yeah, all depending on what happens ahead of you. I mean, you can only do what's laid out in front of you. No reason to worry about anybody else there, but yeah, I would think if you beat the number 2 team, and if you sweep the week, that's definitely something where you can see the Badgers moving up. So hopefully we see sweeps all week for the basketball team and men's and women's hockey.
I agree, man. All right, dude, we appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll chat again soon. Okay, bud?
Sounds good. We will talk to you later.
You got it. RJ Cardinal. All right, hey, that's going to do it for us on this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Big thanks for tuning in, and if you got a few seconds, would appreciate a 5-star rating and a positive review, like on Apple and Spotify. That way others can find the podcast, and don't forget to click that follow and subscribe button. Subscribe for free wherever you listen to your podcast, also now up on YouTube. Till next time, I'm Dan Casper, and I will talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.